presenting the RESV, the Relative Social Vulnerability Index. Integrated Vulnerability Assessment. Coastal vulnerability is interpreted as a multidimensional concept. It includes biophysical, social, economic, cultural, institutional, and management variables. It calls for an integrated framework for the assessment of its vulnerability. The social component of vulnerability contributes to the definition of sensitivity and adaptive capacity of a system. The Relative Social Vulnerability Index. It identifies social vulnerability of municipalities within a given area. Thus, it functions in comparative terms. The Relative Social Vulnerability Index is composed of two parts. One, assessing the level of relative sensitivity of each municipality within the study area. The other, assessing the relative adaptive capacity of each municipality within the study area by combining static and dynamic data gathered. Assessing sensitivity. The first step to build a RESV in order to frame vulnerability in comparative terms within a given geographical or administrative area is to assess sensitivity. First of all, variables for this analysis had to be identified. This was done by means of literature review and geo-administrative area contextualization. The availability and the quality of data from national data sources was fundamental in selection of variables. The data allowing variables assessment for each municipality are statistical data released by national statistical offices and freely available online for consultation. Social dimension. Identified variables have been clustered into 4 relevant dimensions according to literature. These are social, economic, infrastructural, and institutional. The social dimension portrays the social well-being of the system, addressing issues such as aging, efficiency of welfare system, CSO's vitality, etc. The economic dimension portrays the economic well-being of the system, addressing labor distribution, employment capacity of local activities, etc. The infrastructural dimension portrays the sensitivity of the system in terms of building density, with a focus on schools, particularly sensitive aggregation in times of stress. Institutional dimension. The institutional dimension represents the capacity of the system to access funds when in need, as well as the participation of population to the public life. Case study area. Being the RESV a comparative analysis tool, the reference sample group had to be selected before proceeding to the analysis. The selected area includes all 33 municipalities of the Italian Northern Adriatic coast. Computing the sensitivity component of RESV. For each selected variable, data were collected at municipality level from national data sources. Then, computing was done for the mean value and the standard deviation for each variable. Then the deviance from the mean value was given a positive or negative sign depending on whether the variable was conceptually held as reducing or increasing sensitivity respectively. And then standardized values were computed using the standard formula. The sensitivity component of the index was then ready to be calculated. It proceeded as follows. The score of each of the 4 dimensions for each municipality was computed as the mean of the z-scores of the variables defining each dimension. Then the sum of the scores of the 4 dimensions was calculated, and such scores were transformed into an index on a 0 to 1 scale, where 0 is minimum relative sensitivity and 1 is maximum relative sensitivity. Assessing adaptive capacity. After elaborating the part of the index defining sensitivity, the next step of the process aims at assessing adaptive capacity. The design of a context-specific data collection tool allows for qualitative relevant local variables to be taken into consideration for the assessment of adaptive capacity. The tool to be integrated to the sensitivity index is a SWOT analysis, i.e. the analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT analysis is based on 2 sets of indicators for the evaluation of variables. One is concerned with positive or negative variables, while the other identifies variables as either internal or external to a given context. SWOT analysis and methodological introduction. In order to locate variables within a SWOT framework, it is necessary to first measure them, as SWOT only takes into account extreme values, either positive, be them strengths or opportunities, or negative, weaknesses or threats. SWOT framework is based on detecting the dimensions and the internal indicators of a given area, and the external ones referring to the existing policies, strategies, frameworks, networks, knowledge, and behaviors. This allows to subsequently measure the indicators, evaluating them as positive or negative, according to the intensity of their presence. There are variables, self-explanatory in their positive or negative presence. There is noise, which consists in existing indicators with low intensity, but influencing the context. There is neutrality, in the presence of indicators of medium or poor relevance, which as such have no influence in the present scenario as outlined by the SWOT analysis. Data gathered are assessed and given scores between -2 and +2 for each municipality for each variable. By adding all variable scores within a dimension, it is possible to achieve an overall dimension value. The overall dimension value is readapted to a base 10 equivalent. Action strategies. By this data processing, SWOT analysis allows to define the assessment of a specific area, and at the same time it helps to highlight any potential for its improvement by operating on the given elements so as to emphasize strengths and opportunities while limiting the negative effects of weaknesses and threats. Highlighting potentials for improvement is functional to choosing dedicated action strategies. An action strategy needs to be rationalized within the frame of a scenario, outlining the future by which, starting from the present situation, the area can establish effective resilience enhancement or vulnerability reduction policies and actions. The chosen strategy, the one considered to be the most appropriate for a specific future target, is the primary tool for action and the general frame within which decisions are made. When dealing with several realistic options for resilience enhancement or vulnerability reduction, it becomes necessary to devise differing action strategies. In this case, 3 types of strategies are taken into account: strengthening strategy, overcoming strategy, mobilization strategy. Strengthening strategy. This strategy is based on the strengthening of positive indicators, both internal and external to the area, assuming that by so doing, negatives will be critically abated and bypassed or absorbed by positives. Its application is suggested when it's possible to act on already large, strong, stable strengths and opportunities, so as to spur the rest of the system, transforming or mitigating the weight of few and irrelevant weaknesses and threats. Overcoming strategies. More cautious and systemic and less expansionist than the first one. It acts on positives, strengths and opportunities in order to decrease, if not deactivate, internal negatives, weaknesses. The aim of this strategy is to preserve and balance positive factors, preventing major internal fractures. It is to be applied when, together with evident and substantial obstacles, there are also enough widespread strengths and opportunities to overcome the existing weaknesses. Mobilization strategy. This strategy emphasizes the effect of strengths and opportunities on the negative context, which poses serious challenges to the establishment of a positive system. This strategy is to be applied when external threats are so overwhelming or widespread that it becomes necessary to exploit strengths and opportunities in order to limit the influence of external threats. Turning sensitivity index data into SWOT. The internal variables and dimensions of the SWOT to be built are those already used for the assessment of the sensitivity component of RESV. In order to use the previously identified values, it is necessary to convert them into SWOT values, thus in the range between -2 plus 2. This has been done with a standard formula where the theoretical maximum and minimum values were taken to be +2 and -2 respectively. The values obtained were rounded off to the closest integer, thus obtaining values of -2, -1, 0, +1, +2. Assessing dynamic components with SWOT. External dimensions and variables have been identified for completing the SWOT. The identification of external variables proceeded as follows. First of all, a literature review was done. The identification of the external variables for the purpose of this work stems from the concept of social capacity building as means to reduce vulnerability of communities towards hazard, as from CapacNet project. Whereas within the CapacNet approach, capacities need necessarily to play as internal elements, within this analysis context, the dynamic and evolving capacities are interpreted as external elements that influence the static internal characteristics of the study area. A thorough literature review has been conducted to identify relevant variables within the chosen dimension. Social dimension. The social dimension variables portray the capacity of the system of effectively using soft strategies as means of mitigation. Economic dimension. The economic dimension variables portray the capacity of the system to access needed economic resources for mitigation and recovery actions. Infrastructural dimension. The infrastructural dimension portrays the capacity of the system of structurally intervening for mitigation. Institutional dimension. The institutional dimension variables portray the capacity of the system of organizing itself through the definition of roles and responsibilities. Assessing adaptive capacity. SWOT combines sensitivity index data with dynamic data collected by means of interviews with informed respondents. The result is a tool for the assessment of the adaptive capacity of the system. Dynamic data were gathered by means of interviews within EcoStress project in 4 municipalities of the Italian Northern Adriatic coast, in the region of Friuli Venezia Giulia. The municipalities involved were Lignano Sabbiadoro, with a sandy coastline that is mainly used for beach tourism, Staranzano, whose coastal area includes a Natura 2000 wetland area, Trieste, a city built on the waterfront with an important international port, Moggia, a smaller town compared to Trieste, where the flood risk comes also from the torrential rivers that run downhill towards the sea. SWOT for these 4 municipalities was carried out, leading to dedicated action strategies.